Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to look at the world from the conservative point of view. It's always interesting to do the liberal view and the conservative view close back to back, because the issues are all the same. It's just the perspectives that change. But let's start with introductions.
Christopher Wilson, school committee and planning board member and 20-plus year resident of Milford.
Ed Bertorelli, a town meeting member, a library trustee, a good 40-year town meeting member almost. Yep.
Oh, God.
Yep. 1988. So. Yep.
Yeah, it's scary when you start thinking about the years going by. 'Cause somebody asked me, how long have I been on the finance committee?
Too long.
To a lot of people, yes.
Yeah.
I need to go back and figure out when I started town
Do
meeting too. So
do they
but
put
it's
new?
been a while.
God. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, that'll be a topic.
There was a trial. Did you hear anything about it, Ed?
Which, the Hunter Biden one?
No.
Oh, the Donald Trump trial.
Yes, sir.
I pointed out a couple of things before the show, and I always like to time date it. So basically, that jury convicted Trump of all 34 charges about a week ago, roughly. Okay, just so the audience knows the time frame. That prosecution was very strange in the sense that you talk about a leap. It was almost like jumping across Grand Canyon. They took 34 misdemeanors and made them into a felony. Now, that's basically what they did, because the law they got him on was intent to do this and that. That's a very novel way of doing the law. So, it made me say, for example, if Al Correa had 34 misdemeanors, all of a sudden you're being tried and the 34 misdemeanors aren't prosecutable, if I want to use that word. So, the other thing I pointed out was the judge denied which I think might overturn it, denied the Trump's right for a change of venue. Mm-hmm. And as I said to Al before, in 2016, in New York, the jury was Manhattan residents. Okay, if it was in Queens, it would have been Queens residents, so on. In 2016, President Trump got 9%, a little over 9% of the vote in Manhattan when he won for president. He went up to 12 in 2020. But it shows you, how could you possibly get a jury that, and voting is one thing, but also if you probably did an opinion poll, what the opinion poll would be. So to say he got a trial by his peers that could be deemed fair, I guess the analogy would be if you took Hunter Biden and tried him down in South Carolina or Mississippi
Instead of Delaware.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm just talking about not just the things in the case, but should it have even been brought, and what are the grounds? As everyone knows, the grounds for an appeal.
Fundamentally, did it matter? I mean, everybody's wondering about how it's going to affect November.
Yeah.
And
what do you think, Chris? Do you think it'll matter?
I think obviously the people that are the big supporters of Trump, it's not going to matter. Maybe some people in the middle of the road might sway a little bit, but again, I think that it's so divided right now that the supporters of Trump are still going to support Trump, and they feel that, again, like you were just saying, that these misdemeanor charges were really ramped up, so they're looking at it through a different lens, and they say that it's not
that
as
put it in
significant.
perspective where they asked this woman, well, what do you think? Well, he got what he deserved for what he did.
Whatever that was.
And then they said, well, what did he do?
She didn't know.
Well, I'm not sure, but he got what he deserved. He was guilty of doing something.
I know a few people in Milford who feel that way. It's just that, I mean, it would have been, when they walked in the jury room, can you be impartial? Yes. First lie.
Right.
It'd be like
and there was 34 counts.
Yeah.
And
all of them?
How long they didn't deliberate
No.
that long.
No.
And when you're talking about from a financial aspect of it, it's usually not. There's a lot of layers to the financial records. So either the prosecutor who had to prove the burden of proof on it, even he must have done magical things to be able to have a jury of your peers fully understand all the layers
counts
of the financial aspects of how things went 34 times.
They had
no one, over what, a 24-hour
they had
period?
no one
they
to
figured
give
it
them
out.
finance for dummies. I'm not implying the intelligence, but finances I blotch out when I hear it. But I guess one of the best ones was one of Trump's lawyers called Cohen the greatest, instead of the GOAT, the greatest liar of all time. So it was like, I mean, the defense got him to admit he lied while he was speaking because he invented legal cases to present to different things. So, I mean, God love
Did
him.
he get immunity
I don't know.
because he admitted he stole money from Trump?
Well, he'd already been in jail, so maybe that was
Oh,
it.
okay, so he had already
Yeah.
been convicted of stealing the money.
Yeah.
Because I sat there and I said, wait a minute, I'm going on national TV saying I committed a crime?
He's a gem. Hopefully his mother and father aren't with us to hear this disgrace because we can't be too proud of him, that's for sure.
Well, it's
certainly-
interesting listening to the post-verdict summary. And on Fox, it seemed pretty obvious that they believe it's going to be overturned on a number of grounds. And CNN was the opposite.
Well, they did weaken, and then they brought probably chastised one of the reporters because I don't know which one it was because they were doing the minute by minute of the trial, like MSNBC does. But there was one day where they actually said the defense destroyed Cohen, and then of course someone immediately comes on and say, well, I mean, we can't look at it that way. But obviously the jury was the most important part. But again, would it affect the election? Well, this is probably the least of all the cases they're trying to bring against him, the least harmful.
Right, exactly.
And as a matter of timing in the court docket, they're not going to get to anything else. But you asked what did it accomplish? I think the problem is it got him to spend a hell of a lot of money, number one.
But more importantly, time.
Well, and that's
Tied him
why I
up
was
in
just
the
going to add
courts.
that is time because to keep you from campaigning. Obviously,
But does he need to campaign?
yeah,
I
of
mean,
course he does.
I mean, it certainly is going to be helpful, but again, I feel like
the
the Trump
contrast.
supporters are the Trump supporters,
Yeah, but the
right?
contrast. But they're not the majority. They weren't the last time. The key thing would be he has to get out and campaign.
Years
because,
ago,
yeah.
our local rep, John Fernandez, came out and said, in an election, you got 40% that are true blue, 40% that are dead red. What you're fighting for is to sway the
Well-
20% in the middle.
The states that are important right now, and they're going to be the same ones that are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. They say Nevada's in play, which is unusual because it's been Democrat recently. Try and get back West Virginia, and if you get that sort of matchup, and maybe Ohio's pretty Republican now, maybe a Michigan, you won. If you're a Republican. If the opposite case, you won if you're a Democrat. And those are 5 states that
But would
forget
you-
about the rest.
Why would Trump be able to carry Michigan?
For years it has a Republican. The Democrats just took over the state house and Senate, but it's a Republican state. Not Detroit. You're looking at the wrong thing. Detroit is nothing now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so-
Because I was going to say, with all
No.
the blue-collar workers...
Yeah, but those blue collar workers are now Trump voters. Remember that.
Yeah, that's something that's
So.
interesting because I keep reading, and it's in your favorite newspaper, the New York Times,
Okay, well, yeah.
how the polls have changed on African American voters, how Trump is now pulling
Yeah, but
much higher numbers.
But this isn't African American voters necessarily. This is the Polish and Slavic and German United Auto Workers. They're the ones who have gone to Trump. I mean, I would say the United Auto Workers, a lot of these unions really don't represent their members because if they ever took a poll, they'd figure out who they're really voting for. Because Trump appeals to the nationalist point of view, and ironically, we've heard for how many elections that the African American vote is going to do this or that or the other thing. It's a key thing in some states, but generally, I mean, it would be in Philly if these wards come in Philly. Some of the wards in downtown Philadelphia come back like 90% to 10%. And then the other thing is
suspicious.
The other thing is they're not going to have. The one thing that Biden is behind the 8 ball on this is they're not going to have an elongated voting period. The Democrats in Pennsylvania and other states, California, used COVID as an excuse to extend the voting period for months. And in California, there's a law where you're allowed to harvest votes. Doesn't that sound sketchy?
What do you mean harvest?
Well, it means Al Correa is an organizer for whatever group, and he can go out and harvest as many votes as he wants from people he might think don't vote. So you would go to your local bar, restaurant, social club, and harvest votes. You'd get people to vote right in front of you, and you turn the ballots in. You get the ballots from the voting officials, especially in California, where every registered voter, not recent voter, every registered voter got a ballot. Imagine the number of ballots
mailed to them.
Imagine the number of ballots floating around that could be.
Right.
So when you have
But how do you know then that I used that ballot for Chris?
I didn't say that, but the point is, when ballots are requesting a ballot is one thing because you have an intent to vote, but delivering them to your house, what is the mischief involved there? What happens to them?
Because Amy sends me.
No, we're not talking about that.
No, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Amy sends me a note every year that says, "Do you want to vote by mail?"
This isn't it. This
And
is.
if I say yes, it comes
No,
to my
this is
house.
it. This is it where it would send. And say anyone in your house got one. Say you lived in an apartment building where there's transients. Look in Milford, or look in any of the cities. Imagine how accurate some of the mailing lists are. Of course they are.
So how would you know if you sent it to
You wouldn't.
me and it was Chris Wilson because he lived there before me?
You wouldn't. It would be sent. The point is.
How do they check
But
to
in
make sure
addition,
it's
it isn't.
legit?
It just isn't that.
Yes.
Harvesting votes means I'm a community organizer, and I go out and either there's a whole group of people who don't have no intention to vote. Okay.
Yeah,
You convince them to vote one way or the other, whether there's payment involved or whether there's something else involved, whether there's promises involved. You harvest those votes. They don't even, once they vote and it's sealed in an envelope, you deliver them back.
Yeah, and I guess
Period.
the question is, the ballot that they received, is it a blank ballot or is it
Oh, yeah.
specific to that person where the
No,
where
no,
your
it
name and address
isn't.
is
No, it isn't, because
pre-filled
they're
out? So
harvesting votes.
okay,
They're
so you can
they're
go
going to get.
around.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's sent to the address with Chris
We're
Wilson.
not even saying sent. That's one part of it. The other part is the organizer goes and gets the ballots.
Oh wow.
But he
Okay.
gets them with their name already pre-printed on it?
No.
They're blank.
Remember, you can't get to. You're looking at that the ballot goes to someone. Remember, it's gone to every registered voter in the state. So you have those ballots out there, sitting there. Okay. Say someone doesn't want to vote anymore. What does that mean? So, and in Pennsylvania, the scope for voting by, remember the Democrats had a huge voting and by mail voting, and the Republicans had on election day voting. So in Pennsylvania, where the voting frame because of the courts was months, what does that lead to? You had months to vote, not a week, 2 weeks. You had months to vote.
What's the logic behind extending it that far?
Al, it was very clear. It was a political thing. They said it was COVID because people couldn't.
I would, from my side of it, I would say it just gives the people that are going around knocking on doors just that
Yes.
much more time to knock
Exactly.
on that many more doors,
Exactly.
right? I can knock on far more doors in a 3-month time than in 1 month.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so certainly, yeah,
Yeah.
But I mean,
you're
we have-
ensuring people have their
Yeah, I
ballot
mean, I
that
don't
they
see
want to
what
vote.
You're not getting here.
You know, you if I knock on your door,
Legitimately, if I'm going to vote, you give me a week?
Well, but that didn't. They use COVID as the excuse here, a public health emergency.
But okay, COVID's gone now.
Oh, we're talking about when it affected an election.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why the Trump people are so adamant about, quote, election stolen. Whether it was or not, some of the stuff that worked in some states was just crazy. Yeah. But get back to the trial. I think again, the classified documents case is being delayed in Florida.
Yes, it is.
And that Fannie Willis case in Georgia, where she was romantically involved with the attorney, that seems to be falling on its you-know-what. Remember that
Well, I
case?
mean, but that made no sense to me because you sit there and say, okay, so we're going to find something, and the odor of rodent was in the air.
Rodents.
Anyway you
smelled the
you
rat.
look
out
at
of
it, yeah, because you sit there and say, whether it's legal or not, and I'm not a lawyer, it doesn't look good.
It just
You're supposed to be the person holding the flag of justice.
What?
And,
It's-
Yeah.
These people are elected because they run in very racially polarized districts, and they're elected mainly because they're an African American candidate. But the fact is, that doesn't do much service to the African American residents who are victims of crime and everything else, because you take that Alvin Bragg in New York, I'll venture back to New York, he's the one to let him go. Don't prosecute anyone. And who's most likely the victim in a lot of neighborhoods? It's minority residents.
But now, the people pushing to incarcerate Trump, send him away, aren't they the same people that are pushing to not put people in jail?
Well, except if you're the right kind of person.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you can beat up a New York City cop and then be let out without bail
Yeah.
and then skip town.
The next
right?
day, yeah.
The next day. Or you can,
Yeah.
you know, you can rob, have, a grand theft.
If you took away the political
and
layers,
be let
though,
out. So, yeah.
Yes.
you got an old white man who's not got any kind of criminal record, and you're going to give him time the first time for. And I'm not really sure people understand what he was convicted of.
Because they weaponize, it's a good thing. They weaponize the justice system. But what's going to happen when that's turned around on another president of another party?
Right.
The other thing is, remember that interesting woman named Paula Jones? How much do they pay Paula Jones to keep quiet?
I was just going to say, let's go back to what.
But that's different.
Go back to the base level of this. What Trump did with Stormy Daniels wasn't illegal.
No.
Right? It was immoral, but
Well,
it wasn't
that was
illegal.
that was his.
Now, how many other individuals in that same
Yeah.
kind of category have been paid off for hush
always.
money, right? 100,000, 10,000,
Now-
right?
Look at those.
So
Does Stormy Daniels have to pay the money back?
with interest,
Well, I'm just thinking, she got paid to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Now that she's opening her mouth,
She'll just do another tour of Rhode Island
Okay.
strip clubs or whatever she did the last
So,
time.
but again, going back to the base of Trump, right? I think that they're going to look at it through that lens, saying, well, Trump just paid her hush money, no different than tens of thousands of other individuals have done, and he didn't pay her off because of a crime.
Yeah.
He paid her off just to not let out a storyline that would made him look bad in the face of the election time,
Yeah.
right?
What's
So,
that agreement that celebrities get people to sign?
non-disclosure,
N.
NDA.
Okay.
NDAs, yeah.
Did she sign one?
I don't know.
Because
So-
those basically ironclad if you sign one.
Right.
But
Well, I mean,
think,
so-
but that
one way or
affair seemed to
another,
be more off the cuff.
Yeah.
So.
If you got handed cash, I would expect an NDA came with it.
Sure. Come on.
Right.
But again, the amazing part to me is with this push to let people go with no bail
Oh.
and nonviolent crime.
Yep.
And you turn around and say, okay, well, forget who he is. If justice is supposed to be blind, what would,
Well,
if it was Joe
yeah.
Q. Smith that was doing this,
Yeah.
what would
Well,
you push
yeah.
for him?
Well,
We'll see how it goes with the other trial that's going on, which is the Hunter Biden trial, right? So now
Yeah.
we've got two trials from a very high-profile Democrat to a high-profile Republican. So it'll be
except
very interesting
yeah,
to
except
see.
the Democrats' trials in his home state, which
Yeah.
Biden seems to think he owns.
Yeah.
So, which is interesting.
And-
But wasn't New York City more or less Trump's home turf?
I just told you, he got 9% of the vote.
And Manhattan.
That isn't his home turf. I mean, he lives there, but I mean, he's not. To say he's a whatever, yeah, no.
Well, I think it'll
He's
be
registered
interesting.
in Florida. First
Right,
of all.
you've got Trump that it was more on the financial side, and you've got Hunter Biden that basically, he committed fraud also, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he lied about what he put on his gun permitting, right?
Of course he
But
did.
isn't it the
his
same thing as
applications.
falsifying records?
Well,
Exactly,
Especially, but
yeah.
in Massachusetts, they're falsifying the gun thing, and I'm sure in other states it's very serious. The other thing you brought up about crime is Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu, is also trying to advocate that insane stuff about not incarcerating or trying people for crimes. Okay, the Boston Globe ran a story when the mayoral race was occurring because the Democrat was branded a conservative and was pilloried by the radical groups in Burlington because their attitude about defund the police and everything had turned downtown Burlington into a hellhole. And Vermonters were upset about it, so they had a among the usual progressive party, the Bernie Sanders crew, was running, and a Democrat ran. There was no Republican. A Democrat ran, and she was branded awful names because she wanted to clean up stuff. So every place they've tried this to fund the police, as we talk about here,
Now, that
quite
was-
a few pence.
According to a lot of the liberals, defund the police was a Republican idea, right?
Oh, well, like the border
was?
crisis is a Republican idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got you. Well,
Well, no, I just
by the way,
remember
if black is
them
white,
coming out saying that it was the Democrats had led the funding of police,
oh my God.
and I think of what happened in Minneapolis,
Well, also think
what
of,
happened in Baltimore.
but also think of the lack of respect these politicians have had for the police. That's the other thing. I mean, it's one thing to defund, but it's another thing to pillory stuff to where no one will become a policeman. And is that their goal? Remember, a question to the audience, what sane person would go out there and try and become a policeman, a policewoman today? You'd have to be crazy because the public scorn you're going to get.
The
from-
lack of
from all-
support,
Yeah,
right.
and
Yeah.
respect from all sorts of groups. It's just not liberals.
Well, you know, I've always been proud that we've had 2 police demonstrations in Milford, one in the rain, and they were both been for the
In
police,
support of, yes.
bang in support of the police. You know,
Well-
because in Minnesota, I'm just, I guess,
Well,
not
Dan.
smart enough to understand that you beat the police up, you cut the police ranks down, and then you're surprised why crime goes up.
Crime goes up.
But again, a lot of those councilors have protection, just like the mayor of Chicago who was booted out.
Yeah, but she had 50 people assigned to.
But
Guard
didn't
her.
I just say that? In other words, she had protection paid for by the city.
By the city, yeah.
So therefore, and the same, remember the mayor in Baltimore, can burn certain sections down, but not this one. You're like, okay. Now, so that's one thing. Of course, the other thing is Joe Biden earlier this week announced an executive order closing the border. More than 2,500 people a day come over, which is every day. So basically, the border the border should be closed, except the border patrol people say it's totally ineffective. So
Right.
you can,
Yes.
you can
Did they
executive-
rewrite that, or did they just take the old Trump policy and re-sign it?
I think Trump.
And a new date on it.
Yeah,
And a new date,
I think
yeah.
as much as Trump didn't have a policy, he had a presence in the White House where you knew you weren't going to get anywhere if you came up. But when Biden got elected, he sent very loud messages out. Weren't people wearing Kamala Harris shirts coming over, of course, whatever? Which is a
But what
subject of
amazed
another.
me is, if I understood this executive order right, they can shut down the border when you have over 2,500 applicants in a day,
Which is basically every
which
day.
today is at 5,000 minimum.
Yeah. So the border technically should be closed.
So
And what is this whole
what
thing
happened with the gutaways, or what do they call them?
Well, but again, if you come across the border and they cite you and give you a court appearance date, you'd be a fool to show up.
Right.
So they don't. So how many people in Milford or in towns in Massachusetts do we know who are have court dates that have never, because
Don't need
you
to, right.
wonder what is a person who jumped through their hoops recently, not back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, 60s, but what does a person think who jumped through hoops and spend good money to become a citizen? Think.
Oh, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do you think? Am I a chump for doing that? I mean, they honor people at the Kennedy Kennedy Library who just became citizens on I think it was Memorial Day. They had a ceremony. You wonder what it costs those people to do it. God love them.
But
Right.
the thing that hits me is you say, okay, you're crossing the border illegally. Here's a summons or a date. Be back in 5 years.
Right.
Well, in those 5 years, let's say they're not the 1% that are causing trouble, but they settle down, they find a job, they have a family.
Mhm.
Well, now the kids, are they legal?
Of course they are. They're
They
anti
were
kids.
born here.
They were born here.
They're
They're
anti
legal.
kids.
Yes.
So then you're back into the thing that, okay,
Right.
are you going to split the family up by deporting the parents?
The reason that was put in the Constitution was put in by Jefferson. It was to prevent Alexander Hamilton from becoming president. Fact. Alexander Hamilton was born in the islands.
Yep.
Okay, so he was Washington's almost adopted son, and he and Jefferson hated one another. So that was a little kick to the, what do you call it? Because honestly, how many American citizens at that time had been born in England?
Right.
Okay, and that effectively also took out all the Tory sympathizers from running for office because again, but that little thing was added in there for what do you call it? So to prevent the interesting thing, but
Yeah, I mean, going back to you just simply can't break up families. I mean, it's just humanitarian wise, it's just not what we would stand for, I think, generally, right? But it just shows how broken the system is, right? And by allowing this flood coming through and court dates that are years out, it just allows people to flood through, go to states that are more sanctuary wise.
Well,
they can establish residence.
yeah, but Massachusetts was a sanctuary state
Right.
till people actually started to come here.
Well, wait a minute. Help me understand this sanctuary thing. I've always been
We've gone over
confused.
this here before, but
We went
it's a good
through it,
one,
but
yeah.
it's like New York City, the mayor, open arms, we're a sanctuary city.
Right.
Chicago, San Francisco. And then all of a sudden they start screaming, well,
people are here.
what are you all doing here? We can't afford.
Last time sanctuary
Because
was
they
you open the
have-
doors in a church, people came in, and they were under, quote, under the sanctuary of the church. But again, Al, look
Yeah,
at
but
look
Ed,
at the
wait a
but-
second. Even in Milford, we had more than half a dozen families, 8 or 9 families, that wanted to come from Portugal. And my father and mother sponsored them.
Yeah.
So they came into our home. They
Yeah.
lived in our
You
home.
talked about this, yes.
To me, okay, that wasn't something you were doing to make money because it
No,
cost you money.
No, but
You-
remember, the laws changed. Okay, when Coolidge was in, until Coolidge came in, so I think it was about 1924, Catherine Merengue, who did the local history books, wrote about this on Facebook. There had been a wave of immigrants. And if you look at the percentage of population of the United States, the percentage of foreign-born residents was higher than it even is today or anything. It was astronomical. My grandparents, whatever. A whole lot of people's grandparents. They changed the rule and put in rigorous quotas on Europeans
Yep.
and Asians, okay? So that was in effect. It shut off immigration like that.
Well, that's why you've got,
No.
just sorry to interrupt, but if you look at the Portuguese population, there's a big Portuguese population in Toronto. Why? Because the Massachusetts community filled up. We used up our European quota.
Well, the whole
And you-
country you did, yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't get into the United States
yeah.
from Europe,
Yeah.
so they went to the next.
But in Canada, to become a citizen, you have to have a sponsor. And when my relatives came from Italy, he was a pastry chef. He needed a sponsor in Canada, which meant a job. Now, so you had that group, and then you had Senator Kennedy basically, ironically, shutting off European immigration and widening it to Asians in his revision of the immigration law. So for years, there's been a pretty strict quota on Italians, English, Germans. I mean, ironically, people don't realize this, but German Americans still the largest white and ethnic group in the country.
Really?
Yeah, because they're dominant from Pennsylvania to the Midwest, Chicago, and then all the farm states. Yeah, they're very dominant. Yeah, the Irish and Germans are right neck and neck. The Italians are behind that, and then the Poles, the Portuguese, and so on.
Well,
down
the
the road.
Portuguese are minimal because except for New Jersey, Southeast
California.
Mass, and California, you don't see pockets.
No, but you only have a population of 7 million in Portugal, whereas Italy's got 70. The one that struck me just off the cuff is, I wanted to look it up one time, and the population of Brazil,
80 million?
no, it's 225 million
Is it
people.
really?
225 million. I thought it was going to be 80-something million. So it's 2/3 of the United States.
I was going to say, that's.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some,
So you can see
a lot of population
yeah.
density there.
No, you can see and especially if where the Amazon is, it's jungle.
Yeah.
You can see I guess it's got more people than all the rest of Latin
See,
America.
I have a soft spot, and I don't know why, but for immigrants who behave.
Of course.
Because
we're
that
all-
was my grandfather. He came
No, but,
here
but
legally.
by the way, it's all of our stories.
Yeah, unless your
Right.
name is Squanto,
Yeah, so,
Right.
yeah.
right? You're an
Well,
immigrant.
Liz Warren, though.
She got a special
Higher author.
dispensation.
Higher author.
Exactly.
But you know, you think about it, we're all, and when people talk about these immigrants,
Yeah, but that's
and you say, well, what are these Guatemalans? They're the new Ecuadorians. Who are the new Brazilians? Who are the new Portuguese? Who are the new?
but Al. When you have a country that almost seems to be uniquely I'm not going to say ashamed, unproud of its heritage, ours. The school system doesn't teach anything about it. That's the greatest travesty because people are afraid of offending anyone to point out we're a nation of people who moved here. And
Correct,
that's the greatest civics lesson. There's no country in the world, in the history of the world, that's welcomed more people than the United States.
Well, there's very few countries
Period.
that you have a birthright to be a citizen. I had a fellow working for me in Kuwait whose father moved to Kuwait. He was born in Kuwait. He was
And never-
30-some years.
No.
But still wasn't considered.
And he had no right to
Well,
stay in Kuwait.
But again, a lot of these countries, it's like when we talk about the people, the Israeli-Palestinian thing and all of that. You see a lot of these demonstrators who are going out in these universities. If they acted that way in an Arab country, you know what the fate would await them?
But they acted that way in most countries.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying where they're defending. They're not defending France. They're defending.
There was videos from other countries
Oh.
that were circling social media, and they were extremely mad on how the U.S. law enforcement handled things when they broke them up. Oh my goodness, it was unbelievable how foreign
Now,
law
I can
enforcement
see
took care of those things.
people wanting to support the Palestinians having a home.
Yes.
But for the life of me, I can't see supporting a group like Hamas that decapitated and burnt babies. It just,
And also how they treat their more. They have that blood hatred, whatever. But also, it's equally important how they treat their political opponents who happen to be Arab. In other words, their terrorist tactics when they took over the government, throwing people off the roof of buildings. You're in Parliament. Next thing you know, you're in dead because you're.
Right, you might have a different view than what they want,
now-
right? So yeah,
how do you feel with the universities, how they handled it?
Well,
which
the
university?
universities are rotten to the core anyway. I mean, I think Harvard showed how rotten it is
Yeah.
to the core when you have this, what's this term, diversity, DEI,
DEI.
Which is now gone.
Yeah,
apparently.
well,
Or going.
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 I should say,
Going.
yeah.
I was told by someone, again, told, I didn't check it out, that at Harvard, white students are given special courses on about white guilt and everything. So that's part of orientation. So to go to Harvard, you have to submit to these courses. Now, does that mean the son of a Kuwaiti prince or Saudi prince has to go to these too? Because what's more entitled than that? But I guess not.
Yeah.
But the magic button is white, and the thing is, you're just wondering what the point of view of all these things is. That what are they doing to the country? Because, and the other thing is that strikes me is there's no. I'm gonna say this: there's no humor or smiling in any of these things. It's one thing to me. If you want my support, I just saw driving here. I think there are some Mormon missionaries in town because they have the white shirts and the ties and a name tag. And I was going down a busy street. The guy just turned and he had his book in his hand, but he just waved and smiled. And I'm saying a smile does a lot of things because you smile back and you go
Right.
And that's what I think. A lot of
He's
these radicals,
generally a
these,
good
a lot of these,
person.
I have no problem with that pesky First Amendment that says if I believe in a cause that I should have the right in a public place, as long as I'm not bothering. Now, the minute they started going after other students,
Right. It went from demonstrating to encampment, right?
Yeah.
And when
And then
when
also
they
it went-
started getting
yeah.
into the encampment side of it, that means it was going to be this long-term, beyond a demonstration,
And
right?
when
It was going to be disruptive.
and when
Yeah,
they
but plus-
didn't take any steps before it got to that, that's what you say. When you don't take preventative steps, things escalate. But my other question will be: if you're a parent at Harvard, and your kid calls Jewish, and your kid calls home and says, "Death to all Jews," death to whatever. Well, that was going on. The Harvard president fell on his sword over that. Is that a personally threatening thing? Of course it is.
of course.
And I think you need to go back to when it became from the demonstration to the encampment, right? How did a bunch of college kids get sheets of plywood, get all kinds of
Outside
tents,
groups.
again, so yeah, it just showed that
Emerson College there.
they
oh, yeah,
stirred the pot, right? These outside
Yeah.
groups stirred the pot.
But, you know-
so could you ask the typical college student why exactly they were protesting? And when they say from the river to the sea, do you think they even could answer what river and what sea? Right? Like they understood the plight of the Palestinians and wanting their own nation and why maybe, but
And that, to
specifically,
me, is
could
cool.
they?
If you
Right?
believe
Yeah, but that's
that group of people, the Palestinian group of people, should have a good life and have a way to raise their family,
Right.
I can get behind that.
Exactly.
that's meaningless because it didn't
Right.
mean anything.
Right.
Unfortunately,
But I think there's also two folds, right? There are the Palestinian people, and then there's Hamas, right? And it's Hamas that's within
Yeah.
But
that.
that's like saying Daniel
occupied
McVeigh
territory.
represents all Christians.
no, but
When
again,
he blew up
Al,
Oklahoma
take-
Fed building.
Right.
I'll take the
So-
worst one for the people involved. The people of Iran, from what everything I've seen, especially the younger population, are not fanatic anything.
Mm-hmm.
They want to basically raise their families, do whatever. There may be technically Islam is the state religion, but there's strong undercurrents of all the ancient religions there. But here you have a group of old white men, the Ayatollah and his friends, and the religious police who are terrorizing that country. So, are we going to say all Iranians are terrible people? Of course not. But the government that's usurped power is basically aiming weapons all over the world. I mean, you could see.
But that's my point, Ed,
Yeah.
about the
well,
Palestinian
that's the
cause
point.
versus Hamas.
Well, that's the point.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, I don't get it. How could anybody stand up for Hamas?
But
and
remember,
they're connecting.
Yeah.
They're saying like Hamas is like the
Yeah.
defenders of the Palestinian people, and it's like if I was a Palestinian individual, I would want to distance myself. I would want independence, yes, but not the way that Hamas wants to do it.
We're talking about these are theoretical in this room, like they're theoretical decisions. I can decide what I want to do. But just take that poor man, I'll make the analogy, Navalny in Russia,
Yeah.
who was I mean, what American
Poisoned, murdered.
what American would stand up for their freedom the way he did? In the same way, what you just said, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't be in Hamas, would be in Hamas. That's a life-changing and life-threatening situation if you say you're not. So we're looking at these things. Well, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. None of those people looking at, I want to live rather than die, because these people don't tolerate dissent.
So now Harvard's coming under pressure that they're being too strict when they had 13 kids not be able to graduate.
Was this
and
from the
walk.
Boston Globe? Okay, thank you.
No, it was more
New
conservative.
York Times.
Times.
New York Times. Oh,
York
okay.
Times.
They own didn't they own the paper till
So
they
these
unloaded it?
13 individuals were because they were part of the encampment.
Right.
Yeah,
And now what I understand
Who?
is they're not being denied their graduation. They were denied walking.
Okay.
And I sit there and say, now, wait a minute. Since when do actions not have consequences?
And by the way, a lot of people used to pay not to go to the graduation. That was the day in the back of the day. If you in Minnesota, if you didn't want to go to this mass graduation, you had to pay a fee to get your diploma.
That's it.
I mean, well, yeah.
See, I'm surprised
right.
that, okay, they did the encampment, they're not going to classes, they're having this demonstration. How do you do your finals? How do you finish
Exactly.
your... Can you imagine, well, you got a kid going to college.
Yes.
She calls home and says, Dad, I got involved in this thing, and
Yeah.
remember the $40,000 you paid for
Flip.
the semester?
You're shut off.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to retake the
Bob-
whole-
Bob-
that
I
is
got to
the
do
whole-
it again.
the whole
Barbie's
second
credit,
semester.
Barbie's
Right.
credit card
Yeah.
is cut.
And but that was the entitlement of like, well, I was part of this demonstration, this encampment, so therefore I should be, I should get a free pass,
Yeah.
right, on my finals
Well-
because I was fighting for human rights.
well, can you imagine?
Well,
yeah. Can you imagine the
great, but again, let's do the demonstration during the day. Go to your classes.
Right.
Be, but still be a good citizen,
Yeah.
right?
And I could
You know?
support them
Yeah, but-
if they were
yeah.
doing it legit.
Right.
Now, this thing of the Jewish
What's
kids
legit,
who
though?
felt intimidated and
Right.
confronted,
Yeah.
that to me, that goes beyond the
goes-
pesky First Amendment.
Yeah.
well, they,
All of a sudden, you know, my right is that I get to say what I want without bothering what you want to say about yourself.
you're not saying kill that person,
Right.
basically.
And I'm not confronting that person.
Let's be
You're
direct.
walking through campus and feeling threatened,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
You
I'm
can't
walking
even
to
go
class. I
Yeah.
should be able to walk to class.
Yeah.
I'm paying my 40 grand for the
Right.
semester, right? And you can't stop me from my opinion.
But that's what we talked about at the beginning. The lack of humor and the lack of tolerance among these extremists is it isn't in their DNA to accept differences in people.
I think the funniest part, though, too, is right. The end of college gave them that theater to work with. What has happened since? Right? There's no more theater. Right? Their kids aren't on campus anymore. But you're not seeing any type of
Don't you think
demonstrations or encampments. So that's why I'm saying,
Yeah,
like,
but don't you think
so
a
it was
lot-
great then and there,
Yeah,
right?
but don't you
Like,
think a lot of this is also and we've talked about this before. The media who was shameless
Right.
in what they present.
Well, I think
Yeah,
you said something profound. It was the outside influences.
yeah.
right.
Because, like you mentioned, I don't know if too many kids carrying cardboard sheets around with
No
them.
one would not. Never
Right.
mind. They would.
Cardboard
they would
sheets,
have
plywood, right?
Mommy
It's-
still does their laundry in many
Right.
cases, so they're
Right.
building encampments
right.
and houses.
Yeah, how
But
they
it
were able
just-
to build, yeah.
It shocks me
Yeah.
that what are we teaching our kids if they believe there's no consequences?
Correct.
Well,
You
when
know,
you have
right.
when you have an education system that doesn't teach history anymore, and it doesn't, you're doomed. What's it? If you don't do history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Those who fail to study history are
okay,
doomed to repeat
okay,
it.
yeah.
And exactly, ask the average high school student today about the genocides in the world, the Armenian one, even the Holocaust.
Khmer Rouge.
No, I'm just saying, but just take ones that they, as Europeans, they can identify with, and they're not taught. So ignorance, when you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
people can come in.
Well,
and
I think a
influence
lot
the
of
thing.
it, though, is the right hand and the left hand. And they don't put them together because, like, we're talking about affordable housing in the
Okay.
state. We need affordable housing.
Yes, let's go to that. Yep,
I don't know how to define it because they're using examples
slogan.
like Nantucket,
it's a slogan.
where the average price of a home, no,
Yeah.
not the average, the median,
Yeah,
was $4+ million.
again, an outlier. Yeah,
But again, you put in, I guess the governor wanted to put in this new tax. We're going, in my mind, back to Massachusetts. Put in a new tax that if your house sells for more than $1 million, you get taxed.
Well, they have the millionaire's tax, right, which generated more revenue than expected. So that's probably why.
now we're going to try
right?
the second gambit.
Right. So let's
Well,
pile it on
let's
to
get
this
to- let's
real
get to
estate
the-
tax.
let's
So
get
now,
to the chase,
help
though.
me understand the places, like I look around Milford, and I'm proud of Milford, but I don't see many $1 million+ homes being sold.
Yeah, but I don't think we should look at it that way because you're looking at it from a tax point of view. As we talked before, July 1st, new building regulations are coming in. And if you have an addition, so any new home has to be built. I know someone who's building a home in Franklin, and the building man told them, make sure you get all your plans in and approved by July 1st, because with the new regulations coming in, even with a new home, your prices will go up 40 to 50%. So that means obviously, it's passed along to the builder. Now, what sense does that make to make housing affordable? In addition, any addition over 1,000 square feet, which as we talked about isn't much on the average house, will necessitate that you retroactively bring your home up.
1,000 square feet, that's 40 by 25.
Yep.
Size of a good sized family room.
So put a family room on, that means you're gonna, unless you do it at 950 square feet,
Right.
you're gonna
So
have
you
to
did a
ramp up.
family room with a with a
But
master
what does that
bedroom
mean? What do I
above,
have
right,
to do to the rest of my house?
Go look and read it and find out. Read it and weep. Because
But it's a tax.
no,
You see,
no,
or-
it's your builder has to build a home to that specifications, which means the materials they have to use, the upgrading of electrical and everything,
Yes.
will bring it up to that.
Okay.
So there's no more, it isn't a tax, there's nothing more basic than your building regulations.
But how
are
does
now-
that help us get out of the problem that, I mean, I
Well,
want
good
my
question.
kids to be able to live in Milford. I'm sure you want your kids to be able,
Likewise, yes.
not whether they're going to or not, but to have the option.
Of course.
I mean, I'm amazed when I look at some of the houses, $700,000, $800,000 for a house in Milford.
Well, that's what a market will bear, so.
When we were kids, you could have bought Milford for that. They would have
Yeah,
thrown
but
in
again,
Oakdale
that's-
and
At,
Mendon.
that's
at
like-
6.5%.
That's like
mortgage
my
rates,
guys here.
right.
My guys talking and coffee in the morning when a beer was 30 cents. That isn't the point. The point is, this is going to suppress any kind of building that's going to be affordable, because what can you offer then if you're going to build a condo development? What can you offer, quote, a unit for? And then we got the old thing again in Milford, you know, with the whole idea of when the apartments are coming in. Obviously, the apartments down by the on Route 85, but then you got the apartments on oh
Birch
God, what's
Street.
the street? The down by the fire station.
Birch Street.
Birch Street.
Birch
excuse
Street,
me,
right behind the
yeah,
fire
Birch
station,
Street
yep.
down there. They're coming in. So
But you know, in the old days, Laurelwood was always the golden standard in Hopedale. 2-bedroom apartments in 1 bedroom. No kids.
you know,
With the prices going through the roof, now, even those 2-bedroom apartments
It-
have kids in
But-
them.
so
right.
how do you-
and what
how do
you're
you- yeah.
seeing? Go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say what you're also seeing though too is take a like traditional split level in Milford. You're seeing 2 families buy into a split level, right, above and below. So it's changing the dynamics of your Milford neighborhood a little bit too, right? Where now a single family home is now becoming a 2-family home
Well, they're doing
or 3.
they're doing
right?
the sensible thing, which is Al talked about, is his father bringing people over and sponsoring. But it's going to the whole thing of when relatives live with you, when they came over. But that's a bygone era
But
now.
that was
now
a
it's-
short-term
now it's
solution.
more now
Yeah.
it's more commercial
Well,
because
right.
it's,
This is
start
a
looking
long
at-
term.
When people say, well, you're
Effect.
putting in a new development, think of all the tax money that
Well,
you get.
that's
And,
baloney.
and
Yeah.
I asked Paul Abadanza, help me understand what the breakout is. And he said, well, for every dollar we collect residential tax, costs us $1.80 in services.
Well, if they have kids in
Right.
the school.
For
Especially if they have kids, yeah.
on average, commercial is 18 cents per dollar, and industrial is 16 cents.
Well, that's where
And then, but
Yeah.
it makes sense because average kid costs us $15,000
Right.
a year. Average home has 2 kids. It's 30 grand.
Grand.
But the demographics are thrown off because, remember, it just is in Milford, but when you didn't have the immigration problem, in the last 20 years, there was a natural process that occurred that it was almost impossible to have more than, quote, 2 kids or 1.8 kid, however they figure these things out. I mean, what's a 0.8 of a kid, but that's how they would figure it out.
Right.
This has thrown that to the winds because you have families that are coming in and having more kids because there's services, but also just it's the culture that they come from. And then you've got the other factor is, which we didn't talk about, but to get to the schools, the old immigrant community, as you know, when you came to Milford, you basically were here.
Yeah.
You were limited by transportation, by money. There were no cell phones. There were nothing. Today, the modern immigrant today, a child could be in, as you said, the Lowell schools, the Milford schools, and next thing you know, they've transferred to Chicago
no,
or whatever.
Help me understand something.
Yeah, so we
'cause-
talked a little bit about
Yeah.
this pre-show.
Okay,
Yeah.
if
Huh.
we have the Best Western,
Mhm.
so we got 50 families there that where the state is helping out living.
Right.
Only half the kids that live in the Best Western, and whatever they call it now,
Right.
go to Milford schools.
Correct.
Where the other half go?
Correct.
So I thought that
some
was good.
some are being some are going to Hopkinton, Franklin, but they're still considered homeless, classified as homeless, right?
Yep.
Because that is a temporary
Refugee,
housing
yep.
setup. What happens, and I've got to get a little bit more clarity because I just found out about that this week, is if a family was already in another community, say 40 minutes away, all right, and they were considered homeless in that
And their kids went to school in
community,
that
in that
community.
school, and they went to that school, so they were registered in that school and made associations in that school. Now we bring them to Milford, put a roof over their heads, state-wise. Well, now because they're in a sense residents of Milford, even though considered homeless, right? Milford, in the Milford school system, our transportation department has to provide transportation from them from Milford to that school 40 minutes away twice a day.
And
right?
who
You
picks
gotta
up
bring 'em
that
there.
tab?
You.
That is our Milford School Department, which is
You.
obviously funded by the Milford taxpayers.
So is that the reason that the
So-
school committee is making sounds about transportation going through the ceiling?
That is correct, yeah.
Why
yeah,
wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you though? Dumb question, but why wouldn't you You could see that for the school year. But why wouldn't they make every effort then to bring those kids, to have people talk to them, to bring them in? Because
That's a great question to the
because
State
it
House
would-
and our
no,
representatives.
no, no, I'm
Why,
not
but
talking
that's-
about, no, I'm
right.
talking about the Milford School
Right.
Department, because it certainly doesn't help a kid to be on a bus for an hour every day.
100%.
2 hours a day.
But they're right, and I think
Well,
that
again,
potentially
wait a
they
minute.
don't quite
Help me
understand that.
If
right?
I'm a legal Milford resident,
Silly you.
I want to send my kids to one of those neighboring towns.
Correct. Yep.
If they accept school choice,
Correct.
If.
well,
Well, they
but let's
just
just
say they do.
say,
Say it's the same
any of
school.
the towns
Right.
around say we got room,
Yeah.
we'll take the kid.
Yep.
I don't have to pay tuition or anything on that line,
Mhm.
but I have to provide transportation that's on my dime.
That is correct.
Except
But if you're an illegal or
a
not,
refugee.
let's say they're
Right.
legal but not
Yep.
Well,
a citizen,
well, you know,
I got to pay for their transportation.
you know,
They don't have to
citizens
pay
ain't
for
gonna
their
do it.
transportation, right? So how does then, if they are not paying for their transportation, who is? Well, that's on the taxpayers,
Yeah.
right?
And it's on the
So,
town.
It is, yeah.
Yes.
So, and that's where I always go back to the fact that, yes, immigration is a good thing for America. We're a melting pot, just like you said. But there are huge financial implications on the process and how things are going right now. So
With the
this
current
whole
mode, yes.
this whole Biden policy of what's going on and having a floodgate of individuals coming across, now we're seeing at the local level,
Of course.
the huge impact it's having again on transportation
Yeah, yeah.
alone.
And then-
Right? If they came in
Yeah, but
and
again-
came to our schools and they were on our regular bus
but
services
still-
and things like that, there is a
A lot of
cost
pressure.
implication, but far less than having a dedicated transportation
Now we do that
driver
for the
going
special needs
40
kids.
minutes.
Yeah.
I remember
Exactly.
some of
Totally
those
different.
were $50,000, $60,000 a year in transportation.
That's totally different.
But
Right.
that is a special needs kid.
Right. Yep.
You know, they don't have a choice.
Exactly.
They have to go to a deaf school, a blind school.
Exactly.
They don't have a
specific school.
choice.
Right.
But
Yep.
I guess I don't understand, because what Ed said made sense to me to
Right.
say, if the kid was in town B school this year, okay, don't
Move 'em
rip him
over.
out the middle of the year,
Move
but
'em over.
come the beginning
Yeah.
September,
Yep.
you can go to Milford.
Yeah.
And
And
by the way,
unfortunately, I don't have that
No.
answer. And like I said, I just found out, so I want more, and I want to see a pie chart of,
Yeah.
okay, here's my transportation costs. How much is local? How much is special education? And how much is now grown from that outside transportation
And
to bring the
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that
I think what
student
bugs
from
me
A
is
to B.
if I'm a special needs parent, I have to prove to the district that my child needs to be bused somewhere
Well,
Right.
yes.
versus doing a program in Milford.
But
Right.
you should, I
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
How could you just say that, well, Lowell or Hudson or somewhere, I like the school better, so you should pay for my child to be bused
Well,
there?
again, but
Yeah.
that's taken it, the towns that I think the cities and towns these people would come from are also limited by nature, because you're not seeing Harvard, Mass, for example. They're coming from Harvard or Bedford or whatever. They're
Right.
coming from areas where there's other hotels and other things that have been changed.
You have
And then they
hotels, you
move.
have, you have multifamily
Now,
housing.
we're still yet to get a cost estimate, never mind the transportation, but the governor's been very leery of providing a cost, not even an estimate or an honest figure of what housing these immigrants cost. And as a friend of mine said, who was in the school system, said, Ed, everyone wants to point to the hotels in Milford on Fortune Boulevard. Look at for every person there's 10 living in apartments,
Right.
one family to a room with a shared kitchen and bathroom.
Right.
So the hotels are a convenient target in a way, because people drive by and see a bus full of kids getting on. Oh my God, that's terrible, and whatever. But you go back when Milford, there's historic population surges, and Milford was always a quiet town until the first immigration came. They were all English, or whatever. The first immigration was Irish. Okay, the famine and the aftermath. Okay, the second wave was European wave, and that was, at least in Milford, very Italian.
Very Italian.
Okay, well, the response of the town was to build all those neighborhood schools. Now, I know, did you go to the West Street School?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, that was a Civil War school, literally.
Okay.
It was well built, but
Yeah.
it was
4 rooms.
yeah, but they responded by the town at the time, and they were, again, this is massive immigration, responded by building, quote, neighborhood schools, because everyone walked to school, so they built the Oliver Street School, the Park Street School, South Grammar School, whatever. And then they had a central middle like Stacy, and then the high school right next door to it. So the towns responded, but today the fundings in the world is so different that, again, part of it's the transience of the kids, because you can't really set up roots if you're moving around.
Correct.
And that's,
Well, I think what bothers a lot of people like me is the transparency. Because I would imagine that it's great for the hotel owner. You're guaranteed 100% occupancy.
at a huge
You're
raise.
not worried about being paid because you get paid by the state. Any damages, the state picks up.
Right.
But I read that they're paying a premium.
Oh, they're paying much more than
Right.
And then when I saw the food where it was a cookie or a bagel and a banana for $15.
But anything the
like a
state
per diem,
manages,
yeah.
you know what happens
Right.
to it.
Well, and that's the crutch of it all, right? Where we hear, okay, we're going to have individuals come into Milford, but we're not seeing any money from the school side to help offset those transportation costs. And I read about, well, this millionaire's tax, we've got all this great revenue, it's going to help all the schools. Well, why did my Chapter 70 get cut by millions of dollars this year, right? So I can't look at our governor and that leadership with any type of confidence
Yep.
that they're saying, yeah, we're going to get money. Well, Milford's a
Baloney.
perfect example of a community it is being financially burdened by the intake of immigrants,
And
right? And we
obviously-
need help with
Yeah,
that.
and
100%.
obviously Milford isn't alone. And there's a certain category of town in the state, like a Marlboro, whatever,
Right.
where there is that sort of reception, I mean, to even say, well, all our problems are going to get solved with money. That's the other thing. Once you get on the hook for that, now you're
Right.
in there because
Right.
I mean, look at what happened with the schools this year. And it was you and Kevin, and I was amazed. Because I thought we were in for a battle.
Right.
You've been going up 9,
Yeah, but-
10%
But
a
you,
year.
at
Right.
the town meeting, that sounded like a story. Let me put it that way, and it is. But the fact was, what did the budget actually go up?
4%
Well, 4% of how much?
from the state.
No, 4. What's,
Of the overall
Oh,
town
we were at
budget?
60+ million.
so 4% of 60 million.
It's $2-3 million.
Yeah.
But it's been going up 7-8 million a year to take care
Well,
of the
again,
extra kids.
Again, that's the whole thing where no one is. We are talking about the problem here. It wasn't talked about at town meeting except in a way that wasn't helpful. No names mentioned, but the fact is the realities of what's happening in Milford are not getting out there because, as I said, we have no media. I've said at that station, we have no newspaper anymore. We have no radio station that covers the local events.
Yeah.
And the sense, what you have is the Milford Community Bulletin Board, which is people's opinions.
Right.
And you put up, but there's a town meeting member comes to a meeting really ill-prepared as to what the status of the town is. And that's the tragedy of it,
Well, we have to stop. Maybe
Ah.
next time we'll start with the schools.
Yes.
But thank you.
Have more information on what Chris was saying.
Exactly.
We'll
I'll
start
have more.
there. And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining us. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today. Good night.
Good night.